Marked by her society for a fate worse than death, she was destined to vanish from the stars until a human stepped in, challenging rules, defying customs, and offering her a chance at a life she never imagined. Seralyn walked through the spire-lined avenues of Lysara with the same careful grace she had practiced every day since her adolescence. But today, every step felt heavier than the last. The city's bioluminescent flora pulsed faintly beneath her feet, casting a soft, verdant glow that reflected in her green skin, highlighting the sharp contours of her face and the delicate sweep of her long ears. Each step seemed to echo against the crystalline spires above, a sound that would have been comforting if it were not accompanied by the low, whispered murmurs of the citizens around her. She could feel their eyes, inquisitive, fearful, judgmental. Every whisper carried the weight of a verdict already made, a verdict she had long since known, but never imagined she would hear aloud. The Council of Progeny's tribunal waited at the center of the plaza, its platform rising like an obsidian monolith against the luminous cityscape. Holographic projections swirled above its surface, displaying images of generations, of lineage charts, of the sacred law etched in glowing glyphs. They all told the same story. The childless were failures, and failures had only one destiny. Seralyn's stomach tightened at the thought. She had trained her entire life to endure judgment with composure, to mask the fear that burned quietly behind her jade-colored eyes. Yet now, standing in the heart of Lysara, she felt the cold sting of inevitability. The tribunal's judge, a towering figure whose exoskeletal frame glimmered with shifting hues, opened its mandibles to speak, the air vibrating with its deep, resonant tone. Seralyn of House Virelia, it intoned, each syllable punctuated by the low hum of embedded energy conduits. You have failed to fulfill the sacred duty of your kind. You have been found unable to bear progeny. Your fate is exile. A ripple ran through the crowd. Some gasped. Some murmured in relief that the ritual had finally reached its conclusion. Seralyn felt her throat tighten, and she straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to breathe evenly. She had expected this, and yet the reality of hearing the verdict aloud made her stomach knot as though it were trying to rewrite the outcome on its own. And then a voice cut through the murmurs, light, incredulous, almost absurd in the weighty stillness of the plaza. "I'll take her." The words were followed by stunned silence, broken only by a few nervous chuckles and the faint buzzing of the tribunal's energy fields. Seralyn's head snapped toward the speaker, and she saw a human man stepping forward from the crowd. His hair was tousled, his clothing utilitarian and scuffed from travel, and his expression carried a mix of bemusement and absolute confidence. There was a crooked smile playing at his lips, as though he found the entire situation slightly ridiculous. The council murmured in confusion. Humans did not often intervene in the sacred laws of Lysara, and when they did, it was usually with subtle diplomacy, not outright declarations of adoption. Yet Elias, this human who had suddenly inserted himself into the trajectory of her life, stood firm. "I said it," he repeated, gesturing lightly toward her. "I'll take her, she's coming with me." Seralyn blinked, unsure whether to be outraged or astonished. The absurdity of the moment struck her, the gravity of her doom colliding with the audacity of a stranger's claim. She almost wanted to laugh, but the tension held her still. The tribunal's judge extended its appendages, scanning Elias with a flickering array of holographic sensors. "This claim is irregular. You hold no authority under Lysaran law to claim custody." Elias' grin widened. "Technically, you're right," he said, shrugging with a casual irreverence that would have been infuriating if the stakes were not so bizarrely life-altering. "But you didn't say anything about humans, and trust me, I have excellent references." Some of the citizens giggled nervously. The contrast between their solemnity and Elias' irreverence was almost comical, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, Seralyn felt a warmth she had not known in years. The weight of judgment lifted slightly, like a breeze stirring through the spires, whispering that life might still hold surprises. The tribunal seemed momentarily unsure how to respond. The Council of Progeny was bound by law, yet human intervention had always been an untested anomaly. The judge's mandibles clicked together in hesitation, its sensors scanning Elias again. Your claim will be considered. Until such time, the subject remains in your temporary custody. Elias bowed with exaggerated flair. Ah, temporary custody sounds fancy. I'll take it. He offered a hand toward Seralyn, who stared at it for a moment, her heart still hammering. The human's confidence was infuriatingly reassuring, and though she knew little of him, a strange spark of curiosity flickered inside her. She had spent her life trying to survive, but now survival had taken a form she could not have imagined. A partnership born not of duty, but of sheer, uncalculated bravery. Her long ears twitched as she hesitated. Finally, with a careful, deliberate step, she placed her hand in his. There was a brief jolt of warmth as their hands met, human skin soft against her own. The crowd whispered, some with skepticism, some with awe. Elias tilted his head and smiled, muttering under his breath, "See, easy. Not so dramatic after all." Seralyn allowed herself the smallest of smiles, a quirk of her lips that spoke volumes. Perhaps life was absurd. Perhaps fate could be challenged with a grin and a joke. Perhaps, even in the shadow of exile, there could be room for hope. As they moved through the city toward the docking stations, the streets stretching like a maze of emerald light beneath them, Elias continued to make low, humorous remarks about their situation. You know, they really could use a sense of humor here. Maybe I should start a comedy club. You'd be my first act. Green skin, golden hair, and a face that says, "Yes, I'm doomed." Seralyn chuckled softly, her ears flicking in amusement. It was awkward, it was unexpected, and yet it was a relief beyond words. For the first time in her life, someone seemed to see her not as a failed destiny but as a person. A person worth risking for. At the docking station, their journey continued in silence for a few minutes, punctuated by the hum of starship engines and the low chatter of interstellar travelers. Elias gestured toward a sleek, compact vessel waiting nearby, its hull marked with travel scars and bright decals of distant systems. "This is my pride and joy," he said, patting the side of the ship with affectionate familiarity. "I promise it's faster than it looks and only occasionally tries to eat its passengers." Seralyn raised an eyebrow, a ghost of amusement tugging at her lips. "Occasionally?" she asked, her tone both skeptical and curious. "Ah, yes," he said with mock solemnity. "Mostly when it's hungry or when it's bored, but don't worry, I usually negotiate with it before it starts gnawing." She allowed herself a full laugh this time, the sound echoing off the metal of the docking bay. The tension that had gripped her for so long, the fear of exile, the judgment of her society, began to ebb, replaced by a strange, exhilarating uncertainty. With this human, the universe suddenly seemed less like a tribunal and more like a place of possibilities. Elias opened the ship's hatch with a flourish. "After you, my doom-marked friend," he said with a grin. "I've heard humans have terrible luck, so we're bound to get into trouble. Consider it part of the adventure package." Seralyn hesitated, then stepped forward, her hand brushing against the cold metal. She felt a shiver of anticipation, not fear, as the ramp descended and the ship's interior welcomed them. The hum of the engines vibrated through her feet, and for the first time she felt as if she were moving towards something, not away from it. As the ship lifted off, Lysara shrinking into a tapestry of glowing spires and shifting light, Elias leaned back in his pilot chair with a satisfied sigh. "Not bad for a first day," he said, nudging her shoulder gently. "Could have gone worse, you know. We could have been eaten by a space worm or turned into energy for a nebula. But nope, just a little human intervention. Classic hero stuff." Seralyn allowed a small, wry smile, the tension in her shoulders easing further. Perhaps fate was not a fixed path after all. Perhaps it could be bent, reshaped, even laughed at. And perhaps, just perhaps, her life, green-skinned, long-eared, exile-marked, was only beginning. The stars stretched before them like endless possibilities, each twinkling point a reminder that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and above all, hers to navigate alongside this infuriatingly humorous human who had claimed her not out of duty, but out of inexplicable, unwavering kindness. Her long ears twitched once more, catching the subtle vibrations of the engines, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she allowed herself to hope. The Endeavor hummed beneath Seralyn's feet as she moved through the narrow corridors of the ship, her long ears brushing against the soft vibrations of the hull. The interior was a chaotic harmony of blinking panels, exposed conduits, and the faint scent of ozone mixed with recycled air, all of it alive with the heartbeat of a vessel that had traveled farther than most Lycerans could imagine. Elias, already sprawled across the navigation console with one leg hooked over the chair arm, waved a hand lazily. "Welcome aboard the Asterisk Endeavor," he said, his grin wide and almost absurdly cheerful. "Don't mind the smell, it's mostly nostalgia, and maybe a little burnt circuits from the last asteroid field. Minor, really." Seralyn raised an eyebrow at him, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "Burnt circuits?" she asked, her voice cautious but amused. Her green skin glimmered softly in the ambient light as her blonde hair shifted with each step. "I was hoping for something a bit more reliable." Elias shrugged, one arm still draped over the console. "Reliability is overrated. Adventure is fun. Plus, I read somewhere that sparks in confined spaces build character." He paused, noting her skeptical look, and added, "Or maybe it's just terrifying. Either way, character." For a moment, Seralyn considered telling him she didn't need character, she needed safety. But something in his tone, light and irreverent, made the fear that had clung to her on Lysara loosen just enough to breathe. She allowed herself to follow him further into the ship, each corridor twisting like a living organism, alive with pulsing lights and gentle hums. Their first few days in transit were punctuated by the kind of small, shared discoveries that build trust. Seralyn watched with quiet fascination as Elias wrestled with the ship's autopilot, arguing with it as though it were a sentient companion rather than a collection of circuits and algorithms. "No, I don't care if the trajectory is optimal," he told the console. "I said avoid the asteroid field. Trust me, I have instincts." When a robotic arm swung out unexpectedly and knocked over a stack of maintenance tools, Elias threw up his hands. "See, even it disagrees with me. Solidarity, buddy." Seralyn could not help the soft chuckle that escaped her. It was strange to laugh at someone so utterly different, yet the absurdity of the situation, the human, the ship, the vastness of space, made her chest feel lighter than it had in years. Her long ears twitched, flicking back slightly as she turned a corner, catching the hum of the engines vibrating through the metal floor. When a minor asteroid storm forced them to dive through a particularly tight cluster of floating rocks, Seralyn discovered her own capabilities in a way she had never experienced before. She had trained in her society's martial disciplines, and her reflexes were honed to near perfection. But space navigation and gravitational manipulation were entirely different. As the ship lurched violently, she felt a low pulse of energy hum through her fingertips. Concentrating, she shifted the microgravity around a fragment of rock threatening the hull. It rotated harmlessly, spinning past them like a pinwheel. Elias looked over his shoulder, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and amusement. "You just did what?" he asked, as though he half expected her to disappear in a puff of green smoke. "I adjusted its trajectory," Seralyn replied, her tone calm, almost bemused. "It was coming too close." Elias laughed, the sound echoing through the cockpit. "That's fantastic. You're like a space superhero minus the cape. Though I admit a cape could be dramatic. Just imagine the flair." She allowed herself a small, reluctant grin. The absurdity of the human, the way he treated catastrophe with humor, made her pulse calm. Perhaps this journey would not be only survival and fear. Perhaps there could be moments of levity in the vacuum of space. As they traveled further from Lysara, The distance seemed to peel back layers of Seralyn's old fears. She found herself talking to Elias more than she expected, revealing glimpses of her life before the judgment. The training, the endless lessons about lineage, the constant awareness of her body's failure to meet her society's expectations. Elias listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes cracking a joke that made her laugh despite herself. "So basically, you were doomed from birth but with style," he said once, pretending to take notes on a holographic pad. "Noted. Very stylish doom, that's a relief." One night, as twin moons of a passing planet reflected in the viewport, Seralyn caught herself staring at Elias while he tinkered with a console, humming a tune she did not recognize. The ship was quiet except for the gentle hum of the engines, and in that stillness she felt something unfamiliar, the beginnings of trust, perhaps even something warmer. Elias glanced up, catching her gaze, and gave a lopsided smile. "Don't worry," he said softly, though with a teasing lilt. "I'm not going to eat you, yet that's a promise." Seralyn rolled her eyes, the corners of her lips twitching. "Yet." "Yet," he repeated, mock solemnity in his tone. "I like to keep the suspense alive. It's all about pacing." By the time they approached a dense nebula rumored to contain rare, luminescent flora, their camaraderie had deepened. Elias navigated through the glowing clouds of ionized gas with the kind of reckless precision that somehow always seemed to work, while Seralyn used her abilities to detect and manipulate minor gravitational anomalies, nudging the ship past unseen eddies that could have torn the hull apart. "Seriously," Elias said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh as the ship emerged unscathed on the other side. "If anyone ever questions our teamwork, just tell them it's a mix of alien magic and human charm. Works every time." Seralyn laughed, the sound blending with the low thrumming of the engines. She had never expected her fate to lead her here, among the stars, laughing in the company of a human who seemed to defy both logic and etiquette with every word. And yet, despite the absurdity, despite the looming dangers of the universe, she felt alive in a way she had not in years. As the nebula faded into the distance, Elias turned toward her, eyes gleaming with mischief and genuine warmth. "So what do you think? Adventure, danger, narrow escapes, and slightly hazardous humor. I call it a full package deal, complimentary snacks not included." Seralyn allowed herself a genuine, unguarded smile. "It's different from what I expected," she admitted. Her long ears twitched once, the subtle movement betraying the hint of excitement she felt despite herself. "Different can be fun," Elias said, patting the side of the console. "Fun's underrated. And who knows? Maybe this green-skinned, long-eared wonder will teach me a thing or two about space survival, or at least how not to get eaten by cosmic flora." They shared a quiet moment, the stars stretching endlessly outside the viewport, each light a distant sun, each shadow a mystery waiting to be explored. Seralyn felt her heartbeat slow, the tension of her past loosening like a coil. She had left behind judgment, exile, and certainty, stepping instead into a universe that was vast, unpredictable, and absurdly alive. A sudden alert chimed, breaking the stillness. A rogue asteroid cluster loomed ahead, its jagged shape spinning slowly in the void. Elias gestured at her with a grin. "Ready for round two? Think of it as cosmic dodgeball, losers buy dinner." Seralyn tilted her head, long ears flicking in anticipation. "Dinner. Always dinner," he said, chuckling. "Motivation is key." And so, with laughter on their lips and the stars stretching infinitely before them, they prepared to face the next trial together, their unlikely partnership forming a bond that neither the cold expanse of space nor the judgment of societies could sever. The endeavor hummed, a living heartbeat carrying them forward, and for the first time in her life, Seralyn felt the exhilarating weight of possibility settle in her chest. A possibility that was as unpredictable as it was luminous, a future defined not by fear, but by courage, laughter, and the unlikeliest of companions. The endeavor drifted silently through the pale green haze of the uncharted planet's atmosphere, the ship's engines purring like a contented beast, and Seralyn leaned against the viewport, her long ears twitching at every subtle vibration. Twin moons hung low over the horizon, casting rippling pools of silvery light across the alien landscape below. The planet was alive in ways that made her skin tingle. Forests of crystalline flora that hummed softly, rivers that glowed faintly with phosphorescent currents, and towering cliffs carved by winds she could almost hear whispering. Elias hovered nearby, fiddling with a console, muttering to himself about recalibrating sensors and how this place totally needed better signage. Seralyn allowed herself a faint smile, the corners of her lips tugging upward as she caught his reflection in the viewport. There had been a time when laughter, even quiet amusement, was forbidden in her life, a distraction that would weaken her resolve. Now, even in the midst of uncertainty, she felt it, a light, almost irreverent joy that had seeped into her bones through the improbable friendship, the odd camaraderie, and the unflagging humor of the human who had saved her from exile. They were not here for sightseeing. Reports from distant probes suggested that this planet contained an ancient, sentient defense system, a relic from a civilization long vanished. It had the potential to guard resources fiercely, or to destroy intruders with a precision that no living species could match. Elias had insisted on landing anyway, claiming, "Adventure waits for no one, and neither do bioluminescent rivers." And Seralyn had reluctantly agreed, aware that avoiding the unknown had never been her way, not truly. As they descended toward a wide valley framed by jagged cliffs, the ship shuddered violently. Lights flickered, and the hum of engines pitched slightly, as though the planet itself were responding to their presence. Elias swore under his breath and reached to adjust the controls. "Well, that's dramatic. Dramatic is fun, right? Builds character." Seralyn's fingers glowed faintly, as she instinctively manipulated the microgravity fields around the ship, nudging it away from a sudden shift in the atmosphere. "The system is active," she said calmly, though her heart beat a little faster than normal. "It is testing us." Elias whistled low, eyes wide. "Testing us? Did we miss the instructions memo? No, classic." "All right, let's pass the test without exploding. That's the goal." The planet responded almost immediately. Holographic projections flickered to life around the valley, shimmering into images of towers, bridges, and the ghostly shapes of its long-lost inhabitants. The defense system's voice, smooth and unyielding, echoed through the valley. "Intruders detected. Identify yourselves or be neutralized." Elias leaned toward the microphone, pretending to clear his throat. Hey there, sentient ancient AI. Humans and, alien companions here. Friendly, possibly fun, no threats. Well, maybe mild inconvenience, but friendly." Seralyn tilted her head, suppressing a small laugh. Only this human could speak to a potentially lethal artificial intelligence like it was a dinner guest. The AI responded with a quiet hum that made the ground vibrate. "You are not recognized. Proceed carefully. Demonstrate cooperation or be destroyed." Elias gestured to Seralyn, one eyebrow raised. "So, teamwork time. Lead genius green ears, show me the fancy alien tricks." Seralyn rolled her shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. Concentrating, she extended her hands, feeling the faint energy pulse through her fingers as she reached out to communicate with the bioluminescent flora surrounding them. The trees shimmered and shifted, revealing pathways and energy conduits that led deeper into the valley. It was subtle, elegant, a dance of light and gravity, and the AI seemed to respond, its testing pulses softening. Elias followed, careful not to trip over roots that glowed faintly beneath their feet. "You know," he muttered, grinning despite the tension, "I usually avoid sentient alien systems. But if it means I get to follow a glowing-eared superhero, I'll take my chances." Seralyn allowed herself a small, wry smile. Humor. It had become a bridge, a way to endure the tension of uncertainty without being swallowed by it. And she had discovered that she could, in fact, enjoy the absurdity of danger without it defining her. They navigated the glowing corridors and natural pathways the AI revealed, eventually reaching a chamber filled with shimmering crystals that radiated warmth and light. At the center floated a delicate orb of energy, pulsing like a heartbeat. The AI's voice echoed again, softer this time. Your cooperation is noted. The test concludes. Those who survive shall be granted access to the planet's resources and knowledge. Elias, unable to resist, raised both hands dramatically. Victory, we survived, and no one exploded. High five, glowing-eared alien lady. Seralyn reached out and tapped his hand lightly, their connection brief but charged with an understanding deeper than words. She realized in that moment that she had grown, not merely in skill, but in spirit. Where once fear had defined her, courage now thrived, tempered by laughter and shared humanity. She was no longer the marked exile of Lysara. She was a companion, a partner, a chosen family member of a human who valued her for her mind, her power, and her being. As they explored the planet, gathering samples and recording data, Elias kept up a running commentary, full of jokes and exaggerated warnings. Watch out for the glowing goo. I swear it's judging us. Or don't let the crystal trees stare too long. They get sassy. Seralyn laughed more freely than she had in years, her long ears flicking in amusement as they moved side by side. Hours passed, and eventually they returned to the ship to prepare for departure. The planet's AI offered a final message, almost gentle. Your unity and cooperation have been sufficient. You may leave freely, or remain and cultivate knowledge and resources. The choice is yours. Elias leaned against the hatch, grinning. Freedom to choose, fancy that. I vote we take some souvenirs and call it a day. Glowing rocks, alien flora and memories. High adventure package check. Seralyn, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished together, nodded. She looked at Elias, and the warmth in her chest, the unexpected, human warmth, filled her with a quiet certainty. She was no longer defined by the laws of her people or by the shadow of her own inability. She was defined by her choices, her courage, and the bonds she had forged. The journey back to known space was smoother, almost leisurely. Elias managed the ship systems with a mixture of competence and theatrical flair, while Seralyn assisted in minor adjustments, her focus sharpened by confidence rather than fear. They shared quiet jokes, bantering about interstellar travel mishaps, rogue comets, and whether aliens appreciated humor as much as humans did. One evening, as stars stretched infinitely around them, Elias turned to her, eyes bright with something between mischief and sincerity. You know, we make a pretty good team. Space heroes, cosmic adventurers, guardians of glowing stuff. I think we should stick together for a while. Maybe forever. Unless, of course, you're allergic to fun. Seralyn laughed, a full, open sound that echoed across the ship's cabin. I think I can handle a lifetime of fun, she replied. Her long ears twitched once, catching the subtle vibrations of his grin, the warmth that had come to define their partnership. They continued on, not as savior and saved, but as equals bound by shared adventure, humor, and trust. Where fear and judgment had once loomed, there was now a sense of belonging and hope. Seralyn had grown, not only in strength and skill, but in her understanding of herself and the universe. She had discovered that family was not defined by blood or law, but by choice, loyalty, and laughter shared in the face of the unknown. As the Asterisk Endeavor sailed toward distant stars, Elias fiddled with a small navigation console, humming to himself, while Seralyn leaned back, watching the twin moons of another planet disappear behind them. The galaxy stretched infinitely ahead, full of unknown dangers, unseen wonders, and endless possibilities. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely, unequivocally alive. She reached over and took Elias' hand, green skin brushing against human warmth, and he squeezed back, grinning. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked, eyes sparkling. Seralyn smiled, her long ears flicking in anticipation. "Always," she replied. And with that they sailed forward together, the past behind them, the stars ahead, and the promise of countless stories waiting to be written in the vast, luminous expanse of space. Their journey had begun in fear, survived through courage and trust, and ended in laughter, companionship, and the unbreakable bond of an unlikely family forged across the stars.